Hi everyone, here's the Bookamists once again, and today I'm reviewing Slow Learner by Thomas Pynchon, in which Pynchon unites and collects some 5 of his early stories of his juvenilia and adds an introduction, which is one of the very rare moments in literary history in which Thomas Pynchon actually opened himself to his readers. And if there was any doubt that Pynchon was the coolest man in history, the introduction to Slow Learner dispels those doubts completely. Really, anyone who's a Pynchon fan, but really anyone who's interested in American culture, or even more, anyone anywhere who wants to be a writer or is interested in the art of fiction, should pick up Slow Learner for the introduction alone. Do pick it up in a library, in a bookstore, read the introduction. It takes like 10 minutes because it's pure gold. In it, Pynchon talks a little bit about himself, about his experience growing up, both in college, in the Navy, in which he served briefly. He talks a little bit about American culture, especially in the 50s when he was very young, and he describes the struggles of an emerging, not really an emerging writer, of someone who, as a young man, starts to write stuff, decides to try his hand at different styles, different modes of fiction, and he's so terribly critical with himself, and we love it all the more for that. Really, it's amazing to read one of today's most talented writers, if you ask me, by far the most talented writer of the 20th century, telling you that he has a bad ear for dialogue, or that in this story he used this like this reference because he wanted to reference that specific scientific fact and he calls that cute. It's amazing. There is some golden advice for aspiring writers in here, most notably the one that I think is the most sense and the most useful is that when you write fiction, you should always start with characters and with something solid, like a plot, characters most notably, and then add ideas, and you should never start with a clever idea, an interesting thought or concept, and then add a story around that. That to me is the one that makes the most sense, and I think the one that some people forget sometimes, especially new emerging writers, but not only them. And in general, Pynchon is so open and so sincere in that introduction that it's simply a pleasure to read. It's art-breaking. I could read it all day. As for the stories themselves, they kind of differ in quality, but it's difficult to judge them because after all they're juvenilia. They're the work of an author who was still trying to find his place in the literary landscape, to decide what kind of fiction he wanted to write. I'll give you my thoughts very shortly on each of them. The Small Rain is an amazing story about life in the army. It's it feels very much like Hemingway. It has that sort of Heisenberg school of writing in which you only get the behavior of characters and you have to infer their emotions and thoughts. It's nice. It feels very much like an American 1950s story. Very nice. Pynchon himself said that he didn't realize that there was a story in the main character himself, and so he thought he had to add literary references to Hemingway and Faulkner and people, but there was really no need for that. I don't think so. I think it's an amazing story. Lowlands, also amazing, a bit more cryptic, a bit more puzzling. It's funnier, even funnier than Small Rain. The characters are maybe a little bit less compelling, and Pynchon says that there's a bit of racism in there, of stereotypes and such. I don't think there's a lot of that. Maybe it's a bit harder to understand where the story is going. Also, the ending is in a way hilarious, but in a way completely completely unexpected, which is very Pynchonian in a way. I think it was the point in which Pynchon was starting to be Pynchon. Then you get Entropy, which is the story in which Pynchon said that thing about having an idea without really having a story around it, and you really feel that. There's a very interesting, a very beautiful metaphor in the story about entropy as a social term more than as a scientific term. It's also beautiful to read in the introduction that Thomas Pynchon, who uses this concept a lot and who is often associated with the concept of entropy, admits that he doesn't really grasp how the whole thing works. That was amazing. The story itself is very Pynchonian. It's like the epitome of early Pynchon, like say like Crime Lot 49 and Gravity's Rainbow. I would agree with Pynchon that it's pretty much the weakest in the collection, but not because it's a weak story, it's obviously amazing, it's just because it's the one that has the least plot, it's less of a story than the others. Under the Rose is also amazing, but is also very much early Pynchon. It's very much a spy story set in Egypt at the end of the 19th century. It feels like a slice of Against the Day 30 years before Against the Day was conceived, I suppose, even maybe more, 40 years, something like that. It's thrilling, but it's also a big mess. It's the one that's the most a mess in the whole collection, and at times you have to read very carefully or you'll miss the parts where people are chasing other people and you start mixing them up with odd reflections and brooding and apocalyptic thoughts. The last one is the secret integration, and I'm not going to tell you anything about the secret integration for the very simple fact that it is a masterpiece. It is Thomas Pynchon writing a children's adventure story, not really a story for children, I mean a story where the main characters are children. I won't add anything more, I'll just say that it is a motherfucking masterpiece. It's really, I really loved it to bits. One of the best stories I've read this year, hands down. It's up there with the best of his writing. Slow Learner, is it for everyone? Is it just for Pynchon fans? The introduction is for everyone. These stories, I would say, are for Pynchon fans, are for people interested in seeing the evolution of Pynchon's writing. It's not like other people won't like them, and in a way they might work well as an introduction to Pynchon proper. It's just that for such a colossal writer, it's a bit weird to begin with this juvenilia. But that said, if you're interested in them, if like these reviews stirred your interest, they're a good starting point, I'd say. Otherwise, I'd totally suggest it to any Pynchon fan. Let me know what you think about Slow Learner. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Let me know which story in the collection is your favorite one. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.